Hi there, this is Debbie Nicholson. I'm the Director of Community Outreach, and I'm here today with one of our amazing coaches, Mr. Kim Meacham. He has a very inspirational story. He had a very rare form of cancer, stage 4 mantle cell lymphoma, and in 2017 he was given 6 weeks to live, and he is cancer-free today, and he used the philosophy of the acronym Seeds of Life uh, as his healing philosophy, and he wants to tell us all about that. And he's living proof that cancer, in his words, is not only preventable, but holistically treatable. So welcome, Kim. It is so nice to have you with us. And I saw your website and I thought it was really interesting. I really enjoyed it. It's healthandsuccess.org, and we'll talk more about that. But thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you so much, Deborah. Nice to finally see your face, and I'm excited to be here with you today.
Yeah. So we talked on the phone and you were telling me about your background living on a farm and kind of how you got to where you are today. So tell us how you...
I'll give you a little bit of my bio, I guess.
Yeah.
I grew up in central New York in a dairy farming area. My family were not farmers, but we were poor, and I was a big kid and had lots of energy. So at about 11 years old, I started working on a dairy farm and really got to know what farming and what we're feeding people is all about from the dirt up. And that's really where it all starts. Over all the years of working on the dairy farm, I saw all the chemicals that were being put into the soil and what we were doing to the animals, because it was a dairy farm. So we were working primarily with cows, and the antibiotics and growth hormones, et cetera, that were being fed these animals. And, you know, if that's what they're getting, that's what we're eating. So I've been an athlete my entire life. Played 3 sports in high school, 2 sports in college, and I was in my freshman year playing football, and our pregame meal was always a steak. Growing up, my pregame meals were always pasta. This was way before the carbo loading phase came into the US, but that's how I grew up, and that's what we ate. In high school, I always had great energy working out and in my games. In college, the first half of the season, I felt very lethargic playing in games and really didn't understand why. My workout routines were better. Everything was much better, and supposedly we were given the right nutrition. But about halfway through that freshman season, I decided to go back to eating spaghetti as my pregame instead of that steak. And the very first game, I noticed the difference. And that changed my mindset and set me down a path of, okay, I grew up farming and raising animals, and I really see the bad stuff that's going on with what we're doing to our food supply system, and the combination of what the meat was doing to me physically. From a performance standpoint, I knew that it probably was affecting my everyday life. So I spent about 2 years weaning off of meat, and Thanksgiving of 1974 was the last time that I ever ate meat. And when I went home and told my parents that I was going to become a vegetarian, they laughed at me and told me I was going to starve to death because what were you going to eat? Fortunately, when you get to that age, your taste buds start to change. So, you know, all of a sudden I didn't mind eating broccoli and cauliflower and Brussels sprouts and all of these other vegetables. So that really was a major turning point in my life. Fast forward through 40 some years of being a salesman on the highway and traveling over 200 days a year. You know, I had a wonderful life, but it was also a very hectic life. As an athlete, I have had a lot of surgeries in my life. I've actually had 17 surgeries, mostly orthopedic, both knees, both shoulders, back. So, you know, my body was breaking down. And even though I felt I was eating the right way, I wasn't. I had a absolute problem with sugar. My dad drove delivery truck for Hershey's ice cream. So at a young age, we always had Hershey's ice cream in the freezer. And as an adult, I probably consumed too much of it. And I liked Reese's peanut butter cups. And, you know, I was eating a lot of the right stuff, but I was eating a lot of the wrong stuff. And all of that sugar that I was consuming was definitely taking a toll on my body, along with sleep deprivation. Again, growing up working on dairy farms, I was getting up at 4:30 every morning to milk cows, do all the chores, go to school, play my sports, after school activities, come home, milk the cows again, and then do homework. And by then it's 10, 11 o'clock at night. And, you know, so I'm getting 5 to 6 hours of sleep from the time I'm probably 11 years old.
So do you think your adrenals took a hit and you started to crave sugar?
That definitely is a big part of it. There's no question about it. You know, when your system runs down, then other things ramp up to replace it. You need those additional carbs or sugar to fuel your body. It's a vicious cycle, unfortunately. One that we don't win if we continue to go down that path.
Sometimes we're not even aware because we're not even really listening to our body. And
yeah, that's absolutely right. And that's something I've always prided myself in, is paying attention to my body. And I've always been a quick healer because of that, because I have an extreme amount of determination in my life, and always worked hard at all my physical therapies. I usually would use a physical therapist for about a week and then, you know, would let them go because I knew exactly what I needed to do and had the discipline to do it. But it really took its toll on me. And I had a hernia surgery in January of 2016. And when they were doing all the scans and tests, they discovered that surgeon told me that they saw some lymph node activity. At that point in time, I really didn't know what that meant. But I started doing some research to be more educated on the lymph system and what all of that entails. The surgeon never should have gone through with the surgery with that, because I truly believe that that particular surgery created an environment for the lymph nodes to really go crazy and turn into lymphoma. You know, I had a checkup 6 months after that surgery to make sure the mesh took and all that stuff. And the doctor said, this was mid-September of 2016, the doctor said, we could not find any lymph node activity. Obviously, I was very excited about that news. Well, 3 weeks later, in early October, I found a lump that came out on the back of my neck. Thought it was kind of strange, but I've had lots of lipomas all over my body from the physical activity that I've done all my life, and I just figured it was another one of those. So I then found lumps starting to develop under my armpits and in my abdominal and groin area. And at that point in time, I knew I really had a problem. So I went to my doctor. He didn't think it was anything more than cysts, but let's go ahead and get scans done. Well, 2 months later, on December 29th of 2016, an oncologist comes back with the diagnosis of stage 4 mantle cell lymphoma, blastoid variant with a 100% proliferation rate. And what that means is the activity of the growth of the cancer. And typically they say 40 is on the high end of the scale for a proliferation rate. Mine was at 100. That basically meant my tumors were doubling in size every week.
wow.
So I went to 3 different oncologists, got the same diagnosis from each one of them. Each one of them had the same schedule or recipe, if you will, of treatment, which I after lots of consideration with my family and discussions and crying and prayers and everything else, we decided to continue down my holistic path to feed my body and make sure that my body had the nutrients it needed to survive this holocaust that was about to happen to my body. But we went ahead and decided to go ahead and do it. So I went through 4 months of chemo. My treatments basically looked like Wednesday, I would go into the clinic at 8:30 in the morning, come out at 3 o'clock. I would go home and I would walk 3 miles. My wife would feed me an amazing dinner. I would go back to the hospital at about 6 o'clock at night for another 4.5 hours of chemo.
Really?
I would repeat the same process the next day. And then the third day, after they've given you chemo, you always get a shot of Neupogen or Neulasta, which is a white blood cell stimulator, get your bone marrow moving again and trying to create stem cells and white blood cells. So after that 4-month period, part of a blood cancer diagnosis, especially one as severe as mine, is they then take you through this 4-month treatment and then want you to go through a bone marrow stem cell transplant. And now you have to qualify for that. So we went through that, and apparently my bone marrow was mostly clear, and they went ahead and harvested my stem cells. And I went through the 3-week protocol of the bone marrow stem cell transplant. For anybody who is either looking into that or has gone through that, I got to tell you, it's one of the most invasive, toxic treatments that any human being could ever possibly endure, because for 5 days they give you the strongest chemo on the planet. They then infuse your stem cells back into you, and that's day 0 when you get your stem cells. And they have a 100-day protocol, which at the end of which they do a PET scan to see the progress. At any rate, during my stem cell procedure is really where I discovered that I needed to go down this path of cancer health coaching. Again, I've been an athlete my whole life. I walked most of the day. Now, when you're in this treatment, you're on a floor that is completely isolated. People have to be screened to get on the floor because every patient's immune system is extremely compromised. I mean, my white blood cell count, red blood cell count all went to 0. Platelets were virtually non-existent, and you can go down the blood chart of what they do to you through this chemical process. But during this whole thing, I was walking. It was the only thing the doctors would allow me to do physically, so I walked with my IV pole. In the 20 days that I was in the hospital, I walked 92 miles around the hospital floor. And nurses started coming in after about the second day saying, patient in this room now has gotten out of bed for the first time in several days. They see you walking all day long. And then another patient, and then I started talking to people as I was walking, and the nurses called me the sprinter because I was flying around the floor, and nobody knew what to do with me. But I started talking to other patients, and I saw the effect that I had on these people with my energy, with my true passion and desire to live.
That's very inspirational. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. So I went through my 100-day protocol. When they did the PET scan at the end of January of September of 17, the oncologist said that I was cancer-free. I'm in remission. Go enjoy your life. Unfortunately, they missed one notation from the radiologist that showed a small cyst in my upper buttocks, lower back area. Exactly 1 week later on my birthday, I discovered a cyst. So I watched it for about a week, and it continued to grow. I went back to my oncologist. He said, it's probably nothing to be concerned about, but let's do a biopsy. did the biopsy. I was in a grocery store, and I got a phone call from my doctor. I knew that I had a problem. He told me that, yes, indeed, it was mantle cell lymphoma, it was blastoid variant, and it was also 95 to 100% proliferation rate. My wife, who's been, my rock and just an amazing person and researcher, had discovered a oncologist at MD Anderson, who is one of the preeminent people in the world specifically for mantle cell lymphoma. My wife is Chinese. This doctor happens to be Chinese. We had some other healthcare professionals that are Chinese that are friends, and through all of those connections, we were able to get to, his name is Dr. Michael Wong at MD Anderson, who is not easy to get to because people from all over the world try to go to get to him, and he's also the head of the blood cancer department at MD Anderson, so he's a pretty prestigious oncologist. At any rate, we went down to see him, and he treated me for 2 months, and the first week of December of 17 was the first time that my wife had not made the trip to Houston with me. I live in Plano, Texas, which is the Dallas area. And I walked in, he had a very grim look on his face, and he asked if my family was home. I said, well, my wife is, but I have sons on each of the coasts, but I can get them on the phone. And so I got him on the phone. And I have to tell you, the very first appointment that I saw Dr. Wong, one of the first things I said to him was, do not ever give me an expiration date. I think it's one of the worst things that oncologists do, is that they tell people they have so long to live. I saw it with one of my brothers who passed away of stomach cancer. They gave him 2 months to live. He lasted 2 weeks because he gave up on life, in my personal opinion. And I've seen it.
The mind is so powerful, right? If you believe that.
It's so powerful, absolutely. So Dr. Wong got them on the telephone, and he told them that I had less than 2 months to live the way things were. There was a clinical trial that was in phase 2 that had been put on hold for 6 months because they were losing patients to brain toxicity. And that clinical trial is an acronym by CAR-T. And what that is taking the T cells from your white blood cells, infusing them with a virus so they now are smart T cells. So instead of going after bacteria and viruses, they only go after cancer cells. But they were one of the major side effects to it is the T cells then will go any place there's cancer. And if there's cancer at all on your brain, you will not qualify for that test. I actually had a small lesion on my brain that the doctors were convinced was chemo related and had nothing to do with cancer. I ended up having to go to the head of the radiology and get all sorts of brain scans and determine that there was nothing that they could do. It was too small for a biopsy. They really couldn't tell whether it was cancerous or not. And they did not want to do surgery, and I wasn't going to let them do surgery anyways. Fortunately, about 6 months before this, my wife had discovered a certain type of dry vitamin D mixed with olive oil was supposedly helpful in reducing tumors on the brain. I had been doing that twice a day for 6 months. And after going through a month of all of these scans, the very last scan, the pharmaceutical company was fighting me to get into this program. My doctor was fighting for me to get into this program because he knew it was the only hope that I had to survive. And he's truly been an amazing provider. The very last scan that they did, because the clinical trial was getting ready to be approved and opened back up by the FDA, they could not find any lesion on my brain.
Wow.
The doctors have no idea why. I can't say that it was the vitamin D and olive oil, but in my heart, I believe that's what it was. another proof of how nature can work for you if you allow it to. So anyway, I was allowed to get in. My doctor actually took me over several other people that were in front of me to get into this clinical trial, but he had told me that in his 30 years of practice that I was the only patient that did not respond to one single treatment that he gave. And many of the drugs he gave me, he was a lead clinician in the clinical trial. So, you know, there was just the urgency to try to get me into this program. So I ended up being the first person to be given this treatment after the FDA had approved it to continue. Obviously, to be the first person of a clinical trial is something that you know, you go into with some reservations, knowing that people had lost their life through this treatment and hoping that they had figured out the right way to do that. So I ended up going through a 24-day stay at MD Anderson. And yes, they gave me 3 days of chemo before my trial started, but all they did was infuse my modified T cells back into my body. At this point in time, I had that small tumor that I originally told you about that was the size of a thumbnail was at that point the size of a softball or a grapefruit. And I had about 18 tumors on my arms, my abdomen, on my legs that were external tumors that were between golf ball and softball size.
Really?
Yes.
That's really daunting.
Yeah.
You went through a lot.
Yeah, and that's why we chose to take an integrative approach, because things were happening and growing so fast. You know, we know that Mother Nature takes time. You know, if you're in a hurry, Mother Nature is not the only answer. It's
right.
Part of the answer, but it's not the only answer. Mm-hmm. But we really worked very hard to support my body while I was going through all this. I'm probably the only patient, and I know my oncologists have told me this, but that has gone through approximately 400 hours of chemo plus all the other stuff that they put in your body, and never had one single day of nausea, diarrhea, mouth sores. For the most part, my energy level stayed relatively high. I certainly had my days, but most days I was still able to go out and walk. I mean, going through.
And were these things you were doing, were they okay with them?
I didn't go through it with them because I know that they don't want you to take anything. And the very first hospital stay I had, I learned my lesson. I had my vitamins out, and the nurse, you know, comes in and saw all this stuff, and the next thing I know, they're taking my vitamins and supplements away from me. So every hospital stay I had after that, including this CAR-T stay, I hid them in the closet, and when nobody was there, I would take them out and I would take them because I knew that they were tearing my body down.
Right.
My kidney and liver never showed any failure through all of this process. It was basically in a mostly normal range during the entire process. And it's because of all the supplementation and the herbs and the you know, strictly eating organic and all of that stuff. So
you were not eating the hospital food?
Well, I had no choice but you know, they had things like hummus and carrot sticks and celery sticks. And, you know, I wasn't eating their pizza and all their other processed crap that they try to feed patients. And you know, that's one of the real travesties of our medical system is the food that is served to people that are trying to heal. You know, I've read now they're putting McDonald's into hospitals, and it's just, I'm sorry, but that's not the right food to be giving people.
There's no sense to it. There is no sense to it.
There's no sense to it. So I was actually fortunate when I had my stem cell transplant that there was a young chef when you tell people that you're a plant-based eater and you have dietitians come in and all that, then you have these nutritional discussions. I was lucky that the head chef kind of took a liking to me, and he ended up making me a special dinner every single night that he went out and shopped specifically for me. I had to, fend for myself for breakfast and for lunch, but I knew that I was going to have a nice meal at night that was closer to what I would have eaten at home. So I was very, very lucky there. MD Anderson, not so much. I got what they served. It's just too big of a place.
Right.
I almost passed away twice during my CAR-T procedure because of brain toxicity. I had a 3-day period where I looked like I had a stroke. One side of my face was completely drooped. And they weren't sure if I was going to make it through the night. But, my wife tells me that everybody just commented that they could see the determination on my face, the desire that I had to live. And going back to when Dr. Wong told my wife that I had this short time to live, when he got off the phone with her, the first thing I did was politely but nicely scold him, because I told him that never to give us that term limit. And then after I got done scolding him, I started chuckling, and he kind of looked at me strange. He said, "Well, I've never had a patient have that kind of reaction to this diagnosis or prognosis." I said, "Doc, I'm sorry, you're just starting to get to know me, but I don't know what dying feels like, but I'm not dying. I have a lot of life left, and I'm planning on being here for a while."
And every cell in your body heard that message.
And every cell in my body absolutely heard that.
I love it.
So, that positive attitude, and again, even at MD Anderson, I was walking all day long, same type of thing, trying to get in at least 2-3 miles a day, walking on the floor where I would walk 4 or 5 different times. And all of that just helped to keep my body strong to survive this thing. When I signed up for the clinical trial, there were a couple of things. Number one, I had to sign a 15-year contract. And I looked at the doctor and I said, "You just gave me less than 2 months to live and you want me to sign a 15-year contract? No problem. I got it." And the other thing that I did is I signed up for research. So I'm one of the crazy people that actually had biopsies that I did not have to have strictly for research, because I told him that if taking all this extra blood and doing biopsies on these crazy tumors that I have will save one other life, then it was worth going through it. So that was a really important thing for me to be a part of, even though, as I say, nobody wants to have a biopsy if they don't have to.
Right. So how did the healing, when did you first feel that you turned the corner?
Well, part of this 15-year contract is that I had to go there every month to get PET scans and blood tests for 3 months. And after that, the last of the monthly checkups, I felt like I was starting to become me again, and that there was definitely a path. I had, again, brain toxicity is a huge issue with this CAR-T trial, and it's actually been approved already for large B-cell lymphoma and for adolescent lymphoma. And the doctor feels that by December or maybe January, it will be FDA approved for mantle cell, because the testing is over and now they're in all the wonderful paperwork. But the FDA will absolutely fast track this, because he's had 100 patients go through this program. All of them are still alive. He said 2 people they're having to re-infuse because it came back. But he said out of all of the 100 people, I was the first person that he told was in remission.
Wow.
and started out as the worst case that he had had in 30 years. So we've developed a very special relationship. He's thanked me for my contribution to the research and for the project. He's actually asked me to be a witness during the FDA trials for this approval, to give a testimonial. So you know, I certainly give them a tremendous amount of credit with this. But again, it was my cells. It wasn't the chemo. It wasn't all the other medications. It was my cells that ultimately took these tumors that were as large as a softball, and they are now gone and nothing but an ugly scar all over my body. So
yeah, I hear the theme over and over that you were in control.
yes, and
there's an element of control there that I think is important.
It's absolutely critical. I think any person that's dealing with cancer or any autoimmune disease or any disease of any kind really has to take their life in their hands and make their decisions. Don't let your doctor make your decisions. He's an advisor. At the end of the day, it's your life, and you have to make the decisions as to what the right approach is for your life. It was just
Right.
like me being told I couldn't take my supplements. I felt it was the right thing for me to do, so I did it, and it's proven to absolutely have been beneficial to my recovery.
Yeah, I think part of it is becoming educated and doing your own advocating and research. And part of it is really trusting your intuition.
Yeah, well, obviously there's a lot of mixed messages out there, and there's a lot of people that's really doing the best they can to try to help, but you have to find something that works for you, and that's what we did. I mean, my wife and I have spent literally thousands of hours of research, of listening to podcasts and reading, and then you have to filter through all of that, because there's so much conflicting information. And you know, once you make that decision, you have to go down that path and don't go backwards. I mean, I'm a scuba diver, and the worst thing you can do when you're in scuba diving and low visibility is backtrack because you think you get lost.
Right.
Once you pick a direction, head in that direction and keep going down that path until something tells you that you need to make a fork in the path, or
that's great advice.
To the path.
That's great advice.
Thank you.
And were you kind of, is this when your philosophy of seeds kind of developed? Do you want to tell us about that?
Yes, SEEDS is an acronym for sleep, exercise, emotion, diet, and supplementation at the cellular level. And that is critical. I'm not going to get too much into supplementation, but there's a lot of supplements out there that just don't work.
Right.
So you really have to make sure you do your research to make sure that the company is, you know, actually a manufacturer and not a private label company that just puts their label on. It's a company that not only is a manufacturer, but is a GMP facility, is an FDA rated facility, you know, that it's a good quality product. And
that the other ingredients, that there's not a bunch of other crappy.
Well, yeah, you have to be careful of all the fillers. But the other thing that most people don't understand is the balance. Our bodies have a balance. And so what we put in our bodies need to have a balance. And that is absolutely essential when it comes to supplements. So many supplements out there have too much of this and too little of that, and just don't have the right balance for your body to really use it the way it's meant to use. And that's why I say that it's important to find things that work at the cellular level, where they're signaling your cells to tell your cells, okay, I'm here. This is what you should be doing with me.
Okay.
So the first letter, S for sleep, that was one of the things that was certainly a part of the reason I personally believe for my developing cancer. I had been sleep deficient my entire life, as I said earlier, you know, getting up at 4:30 in the morning, living on short sleep through my professional career. I just always thought that getting 4 to 6 hours of sleep was normal, and I felt like I functioned normally and always had high energy, but it absolutely took its tolls over the years. E for
You're a
exercise.
coffee drinker? I'm just curious.
No, I'm not.
Really?
No, again, it goes back to my farming days. Growing up in the morning, and the first smell was coffee. And I'm sure there's a psychological thing. I actually have a degree in psychology, so I've thought a lot about it. But no, I can't
So
stand
you were
the
able to
smell
make it on, you were able to make it on that little sleep with no coffee.
with no coffee.
Wow.
No. Now I've been a green tea drinker for 40 plus years, so I get some caffeine there. But
That's
you know,
about right.
I'm a pretty high energy guy. I really don't need a whole lot of boost. If you boost me too much, I bounce off the walls. The next is E for exercise. Obviously, I've said I've been an athlete my whole life. Working out every day is not a chore to me. It's a necessity. I felt I never really felt like I was a stress person, even though I've traveled over 200 days a year for over 40 years, because I was able to get a lot of that out during my workouts that I do every single day. I do not miss a day. And again, just to kind of give you an idea of who I am, in 2017, with that diagnosis and going through all those treatments, my Fitbit logged in over 1,800 miles. In 2018, going through the CAR-T and all of what I went through in 2018, I logged in over 2,000 miles.
Unbelievable.
People just don't do that unless they have the drive and that internal intestine to really perform it at their best. I knew that energy was a huge problem going through chemo and everything, so I mentally was able to power through that.
Wow, that's really something.
So it's important for people to get out and exercise. Just go out and walk down the block and back to start. I definitely do not ever recommend somebody getting into a hardcore exercise program when they've been dormant for most of their life. I'm a big believer in baby steps. You crawl before you walk, before you jog, before you run. It's important to take those steps. Your body needs it and your mind needs it.
Right. Preferably out in nature.
Preferably out in nature. I mean, I live in a beautiful neighborhood, and I'm very fortunate that every day I go out and walk, and I'm surrounded by trees and a creek bed that I walk along, and the life that you feel when you're doing that.
Absolutely.
It's so critically important. The second E for emotion. That's probably the biggest challenge outside of the physical aspect for anyone that's going through cancer or any autoimmune disease or any disease of any kind is staying positive, staying focused that you have a task at hand and a goal in mind. For us, meditation is a huge part of our life. Prayer certainly is a big part of it. And I have to tell you, I'm fortunate that I travel so much that I have friends all over the world. And I had literally thousands of people that were sending me prayers on a daily, weekly basis. And I'm a person who truly believes in energy. I'm obviously full of it, but energy is such a critical part of the human race that
I agree.
Positive energy from people praying for you really makes a huge difference in your ability to be able to recover from, such a severe diagnosis.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the E for emotion. D for diet. I'm a very, very big advocate of what you eat and what you put in your mouth. We are strictly 100% organic. We are 100% non-GMO. We eat as close to the whole food as we possibly can. I eat fresh fruit, fresh vegetables every single day. I actually have a pretty substantial herb and greens garden that I grow, and I just go out on my back patio and pick basil or oregano or whatever and munch on it during the day. And then, you know, I make so much, or I grow so much, that we dry it, we put it in our food, either in salad or cooked food that we have at night every day. And I know that it's grown organically. I know it's grown with love, and I know that it's nourishing.
And it's full of that life force.
It's full of that life force.
Yeah.
And I will never tell a person not to eat meat. That's not what I am about. I personally don't think that the human body is meant to digest meat. And all you have to do is look at your digestive system. If you eat a meal that has carbohydrates and vegetables in it, typically within an hour or so, if you've eaten a lot, you don't have that hunger feeling anymore, that full feeling anymore. You're not hungry, but you don't feel full. When you eat a big piece of meat, it's hours before you feel normal. You're tired, you're lethargic, you just don't have energy because your body is working so hard to process this through your system. So for me, it's not the right thing to do. For others, if you're going to do it, at least eat animals that are grass-fed, pasture-grazed. If you saw what these factory farms were like, you would have a difficult time eating.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
you know, raising animals, I've been to slaughterhouses, I've seen it all, and it's not a pretty picture what happens in the raising of animals around the planet. And people don't understand the stress that these animals are in. If it's a cow and they're stuck in a stall 24/7, 365, if they're a chicken and they're stuck in a pen, in a cage with multiple other chickens and no room to move, that stress goes into their flesh. You know, when you're stressed, you feel it in your body. Well, those animals feel it too, and you're eating it when you're eating their flesh.
I've seen that with 100,000 chickens stuffed in a building, and they're filled with those hormones. It's sick. You don't want to eat something that's sick.
No, I mean, it's just not good for you. So at least get those animals that have been organically fed and pasture raised. It makes a huge difference. The one thing that I would stress to everyone is do not consume dairy products. Dairy products are the worst inflammatory thing that you can put in your body. And so many people, when they get themselves off of dairy, within a much shorter time than almost anything else in the plant world, you feel a difference. I've seen people in 2 weeks, 3 weeks feel a significant difference just by getting off dairy.
Right.
It really, and I grew up milking cows, and I never drank pasteurized, homogenized milk until I went to college, because we drank it right straight from the cow.
Which is better, but still.
It's still the same milk, and it still had the antibiotics and hormones and all this other
And there's
stuff.
intrinsic growth factors to make a baby cow real big.
Exactly.
And nobody else, no other animal drinks another animal's milk. It doesn't really make sense.
Exactly. That's the conversation I always have when I talk about milk. I ask people 2 questions. Do you know another mammal that drinks another mammal's milk unless they're fed by a human being, like a cat?
Right.
And the answer is absolutely no. And then the second question is, do you know another mammal that drinks milk past infancy?
Right.
And that answer is absolutely no. So why did humans decide that that was the right thing to do? I don't, now that I've become educated, I really don't understand it. So that's my...
Today there's some really interesting, I mean, it is processed, but there's nut cheeses and coconut cheese, and you know, if you need to wean off or you really are having a horrible craving, there's a lot of really good, and you can make things yourself. I mean, there's alternatives now that it's interesting that are becoming more and more mainstream.
Oh, it's you know, there's a lot of choices today. When I stopped eating meat in 1974, Trust me, it was
Right.
not easy.
There was nothing then. Yeah.
It was not easy. If I didn't make it, it was a real challenge.
Right.
So today there's so many more options. Unfortunately, because of the popularity, there's a lot of bad options out there. So, processed and packaged is processed and packaged.
That's right.
You have to be very careful of what you're buying. It says gluten-free. That's great. Well, look at all these other ingredients that are in it that really are not good for your body. So, but again, when it comes to diet, I never tell people to go off the cliff. You have to take those baby steps. Okay, I'm willing to cut out sugar. Okay, so let's cut out sugar. Definitely the worst thing for the human body. Absolutely 100%. In addition to the sleep deprivation, sugar was the other reason that I firmly believe that I got cancer. Chemical exposure when I was working on a farm could very well have been part of it as well.
Yeah.
But, I certainly look at the sleep deprivation and sugar as being the two major culprits for my particular situation.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. They say people usually know why they got cancer.
Yes, I truly believe that people have an idea. I mean,
Right.
You ask your oncologist will always tell you they have no idea.
Right.
And they don't. For the most part, they are being honest because their toolbox is so limited that they don't look outside of that box. If they're not preparing for a surgery or writing you a prescription, they really don't think about or have a consideration for why this is happening. And it's the biggest problem in our medical world today. I mean, there's some tremendous practitioners out there, and I will never, ever talk badly about a health practitioner who doesn't deserve it. There's some that do, but most don't. Most really care, and they think they're trying to do the best they can for you. But it's working in the small toolbox that they have. And they don't.
And I think it kind of leaves people feeling like they were unlucky or it was some genetic, it takes all the control away from the person. And if you kind of understand or connect with maybe what caused the dis-ease, then you're in control of getting back on the path to healing. So I think that's really important. And you seem to, you got that without any difficulty. So
I had that mindset before I went through this journey.
Right.
That was an easy one for me, but it's, again, I can't say enough how important it is for people to take control of their life. I can't stress enough how important it is to have a cohesive family unit or support system of some kind. It's such a critical part of the healing process to try to go through this journey alone. It's a difficult enough journey without going it alone. And unfortunately, a lot of people do. And it's not that they're alone in their home, it's they're alone in their decision that they made on how they want to proceed with their particular treatment. A lot of people do not get support when they want to take the holistic natural path.
That's very true.
Because of fear. And what you have to do is you have to educate yourself and then educate them to convince them that there's no reason to be afraid, that this path is much more toxic. And the statistics show that it just doesn't work. The vast majority of people who succumb to cancer succumb from a secondary diagnosis, not from the original diagnosis. It's a cancer that went from, breast cancer to pancreatic cancer, or their liver shut down because of all the chemo that they got. It shut down because of all the chemo they got. And so, the numbers are just not there to prove that it really works in the vast majority of cases.
I think more and more people are starting to see that with the increase of cancer, and people are starting to see that they're questioning why things aren't working and what else is there and what can they do. And they're starting to want to understand more and more.
Well, it's way past time, but
It is past time.
There's no time like today.
Right.
Today is the only day that you can do anything about. But all you have to do is look at what the numbers show. Since the introduction of GMOs into our food supply in the early 90s, the last 25 to 30 years, the case of not just cancer, but autoimmune diseases. 25 years ago, you might have been able to count on one hand the number of autoimmune diseases that were being treated. Today, there's a minimum of 80 to some people will say 110, 120 different named autoimmune diseases. Why is that?
There's been a huge change in the last 20 some years. There really has, even with the autism, with everything. Every disease is increasing. Even though we spend more dollars than any other country on healthcare.
Right. Yeah.
We're worse than third world countries now.
You have to look at the numbers. Right now, statistically, 1 in 2 men will deal with cancer of some form in their lifetime. 1 of 3 women will deal with cancer of some sort in their lifetime. Those numbers weren't even close to that.
No, they were not.
Years ago. You
No.
look at the diabetes epidemic in the country.
Right.
I read, I think somewhere around 25% of all healthcare cost in the United States is dedicated to that one disease, diabetes. Diabetes is strictly about what you put in your mouth, 100%. We spend $2 for every $1 the next closest country in the world on healthcare. You take the top 45 industrialized countries in the world, we're ranked somewhere between 42 or 43, depending on the study that you look at. We're basically
right.
at the bottom of the list, spending twice as much money. We have the best medical facilities in the world. We have the best hospitals in the world. We have the best trained doctors in the world. People come from all over the world to the US to get trained. The problem is the educational system does not emphasize or even address nutrition. And
Right.
how can you not address nutrition when it comes to health? It makes no sense.
No, it really doesn't. And then, our culture, the lifestyle, the go, go, go is rewarded. So we're very sleep deprived, as you were saying, overworked, less connected to family, less connected to nature. And then I think we are turning to feel good food, things that'll help get us through to keep going unnaturally with coffee and sugar. And then I think people are really trusting, like there's a commercial on TV, so that product must be okay because it's on TV and it's got a nice package and the government's allowing this. So it's mainstream. I'm looking at it. Everybody's doing it. It must be okay. But with 1 in 2 people, it's kind of like if there was a 1 in 2 chance that a missile was coming at you, would you get out of the way? And that's what I think. We're too complacent.
Oh yes, we unfortunately have become complacent, I guess is a good word to use. I mean, we take things for granted. We've become a very expectant society that we expect everybody else to do what we should be doing for ourselves. We expect to take a pill and it's going to make us better. But we're not willing to put in the hard work it takes to live.
Right.
Because it does take hard work.
It really does. And you were telling me you have a pretty structured day. And I've heard that from a lot of people that have survived cancer. They have a very pretty strict regimen of what has worked for them and what they continue in order to stay the path.
Yeah, I think it's very critical.
And someday we may do a podcast on that because I think that's important. I think people are curious because it is hard to know and to put together something after you're used to doing something else for a long time, to then take baby steps to incorporate and have a different type of routine.
Well, and to figure out what those baby steps are.
Right.
And unfortunately, going back to what you just said, I mean, unfortunately, most people aren't willing to put in the time. Like I said, my wife and I have spent literally thousands of hours of educating ourselves.
Sometimes it takes a cancer diagnosis
Absolutely.
in order to do something different.
And it shouldn't, because
it shouldn't, because it's
most
tougher to treat
people
than prevent.
right. And most people in this country don't feel good on a daily basis.
Right. And we
I mean,
get used to it. That's
yeah,
just the
we
norm.
do. I mean, I read recently that 80% of the people in this country are on at least one medication daily. And how can that possibly be normal? How can you possibly accept waking up in the morning and feeling like crap all day long? It just doesn't make any sense. And it's avoidable. That's the thing that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
You know, Einstein said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
That's why I think it's great to get a coach too. I think it's really a luxury to have somebody for accountability and support along the way on an ongoing basis. I think it's really important.
Oh, I think it's critical. You know, I see people in the gym all the time with coaches in the gym teaching them how to use the exercises, but they'll fight finding a coach to help them to get better, to get healthy. It doesn't make any sense. We all need support, and unfortunately, most people don't have the right kind of support system.
Right.
You know, when I see an obese person, I know their entire family is probably obese. And that's not the person that is going to help to motivate you, because they're just following the same bad habits that you have. Right. So you have to find somebody who is outside of that circle, that maybe doesn't even know you, that you can be more honest with, because they're not a family member or a loved one or a friend, and has an independent voice that isn't biased and will kick your butt when you need it. And that's really important. You know, unfortunately, with our loved ones, we want to soothe people. We don't want to, you know, tell them that they have to get off their butt and go out and walk around the block. Right. Or stop putting those potato chips in your mouth. Go get a celery stick or a carrot stick. Right. You know, somebody that can help direct you to make the right kinds of decisions. And most people are not going to do what my wife and I did, spending thousands and thousands of hours researching. Again, the mindset, unfortunately, of this country is, show me a path, give me something that I can follow, and I'll follow it. We don't have a lot of leaders left in this country. We have followers. I'm a leader. I love to lead. I have since I was a kid, being captains on athletic teams and understanding the importance of team camaraderie and all of those things. And that's what you need. You don't need a coach that's a rah-rah coach. You need a coach that tells you like it is. You need a coach that gives you a direction that is an option. What has worked for me may not necessarily work for you, but I know within this wide range of options that there is something in there that will resonate with you that you'll do, because that's the only treatment that works, is one that you will follow. Right.
Right. And you have to choose yourself.
Absolutely. That's
right.
That's one situation.
That's a journey right there. That's a journey right there, you know. Yeah. And then when you do that, you find in that range, like you said, what's going to work with you and what you're actually going to follow. And then it's nice to have a coach that will help you put that into place. So tell us where to find you, your website, healthandsuccess.org.
Healthandsuccess.org is our website. We do blogs on it. We're on Facebook, Instagram. We're starting to do some YouTube videos, and there we are KI Health and Success for Kim and Ingrid. We live in Plano, Texas. My email is info@healthandsuccess.com. People are more than welcome to reach out to me. I've been fortunate enough to work for myself for the last 40 years, and so I have a very flexible schedule. I'm always available for a conversation.
Well, this has been unbelievably interesting and inspirational. And if Kim resonates with you, then he's given you his contact information. We will have a blog article with this and all his information. And I love your SEEDS acronym. I think that's really awesome. And I'm so glad that you're healthy and happy and here to help others. And we're just overjoyed to have you in our coaching family. And I want to thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much. I've been following BeatCancer.Org for a while. I love the site and feel it's providing a tremendous service to thousands of people out there, and that's one of the reasons why I decided to go through and get the coaching certificate with you guys, because I have a lot of respect for what you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's just a wonderful group of like-minded people and coaches, all supporting and interacting, and we're doing great work. So Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And I just want to let everybody know that it's in my world, it's all about you. It's not about me.
Right.
Thank you.
That's great parting words. Thank you so much. Have a great one.
You too, Deborah.